Every time there's a new COB light on the market that has similar specs to an Aputure light, but for less money, you'll undoubtedly see them tagged as Aputure 120D killers. But they never are. They always have significant drawbacks like terrible build quality or a 50mm jet engine for cooling, ruining the audio of your videos. That list includes the previous efforts from Godox, like their SL series. But these new lights from Godox, the VL series, are not only $350 cheaper than their matching Aputure lights, but they're also as good or better in pretty much every category. Let's get undone.
Gerald Undone. He's crazy.
What's happening, everybody? I'm Gerald Undone, and I'm not nearsighted. I just have shallow depth of field. So today we're going to talk about 4 products. I've got the Godox VL150, which is similar to the Aputure 120D Mark II, the Godox VL300, which is similar to the Aputure 300D Mark II, and the Godox FV150, which is like an Aputure 120D meets a Godox TT350 flash unit. It does both continuous light and flash. And then since we're saving money on lights, I figured I'd save you some money on modifiers as well, because here I have a parabolic softbox, which is pretty much a clone of the Light Dome 2, but for half the price. So there's some conveniences and quality aspects of lights that the Mark II Aputures have nailed that many other lights fail to live up to. And I'm going to go over those now, but on these Godox lights, since we finally have a suitable replacement. Now it's worth noting, however, that if it wasn't for Aputure, I don't think Godox would have a model to base their light on and achieve such excellent results. So even though we should naturally expect technology to advance upon what's already out there, we have to give credit to Aputure here as well. So these new lights from Godox are dimmable from 100% down to 0% in 1% increments, so none of that 10% minimum nonsense. And more importantly, the brightness response is linear, so 100% is twice as bright as 50%, and 20% is twice as bright as 10%, and so on. Some lights, including the 120D Mark II from Aputure, have a strong curve to their output, and they ramp up quickly near the last 20%. The 300D Mark II was the first light from Aputure to include a linear response option, and we're seeing that same improvement here on the VL and FV series from Godox. And speaking of these two series, by the way, there's 2 other lights in this family. There's a middle light between these two, the VL200, and a more powerful version of this one, the FV200. And speaking of curves, the VL lights have a very similar fan curve to the Aputure lights as well. Previous efforts in this class have commonly had the shortcoming of being much noisier, but that's not the case anymore for the VL series. In my tests, the volume of the fan when active matched that of the Aputure lights. And even better, it takes longer before it kicks in and has a higher threshold for brightness level before triggering the fan. In my studio, with a room temperature of about 22 degrees Celsius or 72 Fahrenheit, I could run the VL150 at up to 50% power without the fan turning on, and the VL300 up to 35% power before activating the fan, which is actually quite awesome for me because I run this 300D Mark II right here for this shot at around 35% power, and the fan usually comes on in the middle of my video, where it doesn't with the Godox. And that 35% power is actually a little bit brighter on the Godox over the Aputure as well. I was getting about 10,500 lux at 1 meter with my 300D Mark II and about 11,300 with the Godox VL300, both reading around 5400 Kelvin and both giving similar color accuracy scores on my Sekonic C700. Now, the 300D Mark II did have a slightly higher CRI of 97.7 versus the 96.9 on the VL300, but CRI isn't everything, so near the end of this video I'll give you some practical side-by-sides of how the light affects my skin tone and this scene. Now, the VL150 tells a similar story when compared to the Aputure 120D Mark II. It's a bit brighter at 6850 lux at 1 meter versus Aputure's 6700 lux, only this time the Godox was more color accurate and produced temperature more closely aligned to the advertised 5600 Kelvin. The Godox measured 5645 Kelvin, but the Aputure was cooler at 5836. Now the FV150 is a different animal, and we'll get more into it in a minute, but in terms of the continuous light aspect of it, it performed terrifically. It was brighter than the 120D Mark II and the VL150, coming in at around 7200 lux at 1 meter, and was just as color accurate and just as consistent with its temperature. Now, these differences are pretty minimal though between these lights and the Aputure lights, so it's pretty safe to consider them one-to-one substitutes for Aputure lights when using them bare bulb or through the majority of modifiers. However, they are not the same when using a reflector. If you're somebody who only ever uses a softbox or Fresnel or really any other modifier, you can probably ignore this part. But if you use the included reflector dishes a lot when you shoot, you will get significantly higher output from the Godox VL series than you will over the Aputure lights. I tried 3 different reflectors, and in each case, the Godox would give up to twice the output to the comparable Aputure light. For example, in one test, the 120D Mark II jumped up to 27,000 lux at 1 meter with the reflector on, where the VL150 jumped to 60,000 lux with the same reflector. And the Aputure 300D Mark II went up to 44,000 lux with the reflector on, but the VL300 went up to 79,000. I was discussing this phenomenon with Tommy Calloway.
Hey, I'm Tommy.
Try and figure out why there's such a disparity, because they're so similar otherwise. The beam angles are pretty much the same. The Godox was a few degrees tighter, but almost equal. The evenness of the spread was pretty equal too. I measured the light at 45 degrees and again at 70 degrees off axis, and both the Godox and the Aputure have a similar fall off out to the sides. But the chip on the Godox is larger, and it seems to sit more ideally placed within the shape of the reflector, that I think it's more ideally hitting the dish for maximum reflectance, where the Aputure chip sits a bit farther forward and is smaller and more obstructed. In either case, like I said, if you're using a reflector, the Godox should be your pick, and the reflector quality is great on the VL150 and 300 as well. It's solid, well designed, which is something that was weaker in the previous Godox COBs. The FV150's reflector, on the other hand, is a lot more basic and nothing to really get excited about. It's a little bit flimsier, but the FV150 is $50 cheaper than the VL150, and it shows in a few ways. For example, the FV150 doesn't come with any kind of carrying case, but the VL series has taken notes from Aputure here as well, and are using very similar protective rectangular bags with generous padded inserts. And the VL series is able to be powered with V-mount batteries, where the FV series is mains power only. But we'll talk more about power in a second. They all come with remote control, and it's the same one, and it's interchangeable between them, and now Godox has added phone app support as well to keep up with Aputure's new app. When it comes to build quality though, both of these new lines are fantastic. They now have a solid metal construction with a very sturdy yoke and a big knob that locks down with a twice gasketed rosette that can easily take a full-size light dome without any drooping. The Bowens mounts are also very secure, and they're easy to operate with a sliding release lever, and actually instill more confidence than even the Aputures. Even when using Aputure modifiers like barn doors or the Fresnel, you get a more secure fit on the Godox lights. The mount and the tilt brake are two areas where most discount lights have been lacking in the past, but these new Godox lights perform excellently. The Godox also feature two things the Aputures don't: two-way spigot ports, so that you can mount it on your C-stand like this, or like this, the spigot can actually go through, which is actually convenient based on the way that I'm hanging my Light Dome 2 right now. I wish that I could do this on my 300D. And they also come with umbrella holders just down here, which they slide in through here, and then there's a spring in the back that holds them in place. And this is pretty great if you want a really cheap modifying diffusion option, because not only will it place the umbrella in a really great spot based on the center of the bulb, but it actually holds it really well and gives you a great option for less money than a larger modifier. The cabling and interface on the VL series is reminiscent of the Mark I Aputure lights, where you have a control box and then a power supply with 3 cable sections in between. But where Aputure significantly improved with their Mark IIs, Godox has made more of an Aputure Mark 1.5. You still require the 3 cable sections, and the interface is a little bit less premium, but the boxes don't make any noise and the cable lengths are perfect. You have enough slack in the top section that you can get the light like 10 feet in the air or higher while maintaining a decent height for the control box, which can hang on a stand using this retractable nylon loop. And then the mid cable is long enough to never have your power brick dangling dirty halfway up the pole. But the main power cable is also long enough that for shorter runs, you can attach the power brick using this Velcro V-mount adapter that secures this to the back of your control box. And then even with this tidier setup, you still have enough length in the third cable probably about 12 feet, maybe 4 meters, just over 4 meters, closer to 15 feet, that can run all the way to the outlet. So even with a tie to your setup, you're still going to have plenty of reach. So while not as good as the Aputure 300D Mark II's excellent design in this regard, it's an improvement on the Mark I's and is appreciated. But of course, this is where the FV150 differs the most. It does not support battery power and instead just comes with one long power cable that plugs directly into the back of the light, where you'll also find the interface. Now, housing the power supply internally means that the light is bigger, heavier, and the fans are running at all times without a curve to reduce noise at lower output levels. So although it does have a slightly better output than the VL150 and is $50 cheaper, I don't like it as much for video shoots because of the potential sound issues. However, it does do something pretty great, which is that it includes the ability to switch to the flash sync mode, which then allows you to connect to Godox's existing wireless X system, and while doing this, you can simultaneously use the continuous light aspect of it as a modeling light that performs identically to the light in video mode. Same power, same accuracy. When in video mode, the right knob is your brightness, and your left knob is what allows you to choose up to 10 different strobe flash effects, like lightning or faulty bulb. But when you switch to the flash mode, the right knob controls your flash power from 1/1 down to 1/16, and the left knob is now your modeling light control from 0 to 100% in 1% increments. The only thing I don't like about this is that after you fire off a flash, there's a slight delay before the modeling light comes back on, leaving you in the dark for just under a second, which is a bit jarring. It does accept high-speed sync up to 1/8000th of a second shutter speed though, but it does not accept TTL. Now, the flash power is greater than the continuous output. For example, if I achieve proper exposure at f11 with the continuous light, I can get it down to f20 with the flash at 1/1 power. But that output isn't that impressive when compared to the dedicated flash units. For example, the AD200, which is a fantastic flash from Godox, accomplishes at 1/16th what the FV150 does at full power. Hell, even this little TT350, which we use as an on-camera transmitter more than we do a flash, is 2 stops brighter than the FV150 at full power. So it's one of those cases where you can combine 2 functions into one light, neither function excels, but you have the convenience of having a single package. And in this case, at a very tempting price, it's only $350 for the FV150. Now, you would definitely be better off with an AD200 for your flash and the VL150 for your continuous light, but the AD200 is $300 and the VL150 is $400. So it'll cost you double the price of the FV150 to separate your functions, but it's the only way to go if you need battery power or if you want to have a better fan curve for audio. But if you're just looking for a video light, the VL150 for only $50 more is the better buy, and at nearly half the price of the Aputure 120D Mark II, or $350 less, the Godox VL150 is the clear winner between those two options as well. And the same can be said between the VL300 and the Aputure 300D Mark II, which also has a $350 price difference, with the Godox costing $750 and the Aputure $1,100. Now, although the Godox is the better buy if you were purchasing one right now, it doesn't do anything to render the Aputure obsolete. And if you already own Aputure lights, there's no real reason to switch to Godox, but you can definitely supplement your kit with these Godox lights, save some money, and have very consistent results. To demonstrate this, as promised, here's some comparisons of the different lights hitting me. Now, in those comparisons, I also showed the Aputure light dome against this Laufas parabolic softbox, which has the same instant assembly design as the Aputure, but at only half the price, or $110. It comes with a grid and is nearly the same diameter. I would argue, though, that the Aputure has a slightly better build quality with a more rugged Bowens mount, but that also makes the Aputure a little bit heavier. But for those more budget conscious, this is a fantastic alternative with almost no drawbacks, and so much better than the other cheap alternatives that have you inserting the rods one at a time. It comes with an inner baffle, which eliminates any hot spots, and has a push-button release mechanism for the rods to quickly collapse the dome. The Light Dome 2 does come with a thicker front diffusion material though. This one is a little bit thin, but it's adequate, and the Velcro on the Light Dome 2 is a bit more aggressive. Alright, let's wrap this up. Basically, when it comes to Aputure light clones, you usually have to make some considerable concessions to achieve that lower price tag. But with this new Godox VL series, you just don't. It's that simple. You might not be saving as much money as the previous SL series from Godox or some of the other budget options out there, but you're not giving up as much either, which makes these new VL lights the best value COB lights available. But that's going to be it for me. I hope you found this video helpful, or at least entertaining. And if you did, make sure you leave it the old thumbs up and consider subscribing if you haven't already. But if you did not find this video helpful or entertaining, try setting the playback speed to 75%. All right, I'm done.